My name's Katrina Vulgari. I'm 30 years old. Today is the 2nd of November 2021 and the time is 22 minutes past 2 in the afternoon. I've been asked to present my views by Bristol City Council on public spending and housing. Bear with me whilst I acquire the appropriate information. Help shape our 30-year plan for council homes. This is available on the Housing Options website, this information. It's highlighted here in yellow on my screen. We know we have a housing crisis in Bristol and we want to be part of finding solutions to that crisis. Bear with me whilst I get a pen and a piece of paper. First of all, what I'm going to do is make a summary for my own personal use of the information that I'm being provided with. So the information thus far that I've been provided with is that this is the Housing Options website. There's a 30-year plan, and that plan is for council homes. So that's 3 pieces of information. We know we have a housing crisis in Bristol. There's the 4th. Housing crisis. And the 5th, the location of this crisis is Bristol. So this is dissemination of information. I'm disseminating, I'm separating and taking out important pieces of information to help me to place into context, to contextualize these solutions that are being looked for. We have a housing crisis in Bristol and we want to be a part. So Housing Options, this is published on their website. So when they say we want to be a part, I assume that this is referring to those who work for Housing Options, which is a part of Bristol City Council. So Housing Options are the we collective terminology in this piece of writing. And we want to be a part of finding solutions to the aforementioned crisis. When they say a part of finding solutions, to me, my understanding is that that means that they understand that they can contribute to finding solutions, and that other people or organisations or other viewpoints can also be contributed, because the terminology that's used there is a part. Now, to be a part of something, automatically by the nature of the definition of that word, implies a whole. Okay? So if somebody says to you, would you like a slice of pie? You assume that there's a whole pie and the slice has come away from that pie. The slice has come away from that pie and you now have a part, a slice, of the whole total pie. So they understand, acknowledge and recognise that finding these solutions to this housing crisis here in Bristol is bigger than them. and that they are wanting to play a part in finding the solutions, which means that solutions can be presented from other places and other angles. Okay. Now, I have noticed it says finding solutions, which is a really important step. So before we can apply a solution to a situation, it has to be found. They don't refer to applying any of the solutions that they find, though. They simply refer to finding solutions. So whether they actually do anything with the solutions that are found is another question altogether. And these solutions that they want to be a part of finding relate to the aforementioned housing crisis here in Bristol. I'll continue reading. As a public sector landlord, the money we receive, we being Housing Options, a part of Bristol City Council, the money we receive from our council housing rents and service charges is kept in a separate account called our Housing Revenue Account, or the HRA. So now that I've established or disseminated important key bits of information, which I've written down here. So, Housing Options website, 30-year plan, council homes, housing crisis, Bristol, identifying who the we is in the text of writing, which is Housing Options, part of Bristol City Council, and that they're looking for solutions to this crisis. Okay. Now that that base is covered, I can shift my process of dissemination because I have a foundational viewpoint from which to interpret the text that is to follow. So now that I have a foundation of what this information is about, the rest of what I'm reading can be built on top of the foundations that I've established, which are essential to finding solutions. Okay. So we've been told about HRA, which is Housing Revenue Account, which is the money that is received. Okay. So HRA, Housing Revenue Account, the money pot. Let's put it that way. The money pot. So now they're telling me, as a reader of this information, that they have resources. So they have resources and they have a crisis. Okay, so those two things have been established in this reading of this initial paragraph under the heading Help Shape Our 30-Year Plan for Council Homes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly summarise the information that I have and bring it back together. Okay, so we have a crisis, we need solutions, and we have resources. Fantastic. Let's continue. This money is exclusively for building and maintaining council housing. Okay, let me just add that. So HRA, Housing Revenue, Account. Housing Revenue Account. Housing Revenue Account, which is that pot of money that we talked about, that I've summarised as resources, financial resources. And it's stated here that this money, these resources, these financial resources, is exclusively for building and maintaining. So building, and a separate title, maintaining, and then a collective title is council housing. So if you look here, we've got resources, and they're exclusively for building and maintaining council housing. Okay? Give myself a fresh page and continue reading. We can borrow money to build more homes. Now, this is the first reference and use of the word homes. So far, we've had reference to housing crisis, public sector, landlord, housing, accounts, building, maintaining council housing. So now there's a reference to we can borrow money to build more homes or to refurbish or regenerate existing homes. Now, this is really important to me because a home can be a very different thing to a house. A house is a building, it's a shell, it's made of bricks and people can live inside of it. However, a home or homeliness or the feeling of a home involves an emotional connection. It involves feelings and it involves a lot of elements that come together that make that physical space, that house, that space into a home. Okay? So we've had reference to, just to recap again, HRA, which is the Housing Revenue Account, which is money, which is resources. And this money, as aforementioned, is collected from rents and service charges. Now, separately, in this new paragraph, it's stated that we can borrow money to build more homes. So now they're talking about borrowing. Now, I'm a little bit confused as to why they're talking about borrowing in this second paragraph when they've just referred to having an exclusive pot of money made for building and maintaining council houses. So this next paragraph has created a little sproutling that's come off from the main stem. Now we're talking about borrowing. It makes no reference who they're borrowing from. It makes no reference to what their financial situation is as an institution. But borrowing money is not the same as already having money there. So now, in my mind, there's a separation. There's this pot of money called the HRA, which is used exclusively for building and maintaining council houses. Okay, so there's that pot of money. Okay, collected from rents and charges, service charges. Now, the separate paragraph is referring to borrowing, which means we don't already have what it is that we are going to lend from somebody else. And in this instance, that's money. So it says here, we can borrow money. So when we borrow money from financial institutions or investors, for example, a bank loan or a mortgage broker, that usually involves a contractual obligation and agreement, which sets out the confines of that agreement, and then hopefully the agreement is settled between two or more parties, and the agreed amounts are loaned, and the person who is borrowing uses that money in conjunction with those terms of agreement. So what I notice here is the likelihood of futuristic problems occurring further down the line. Because when we borrow money, we tie ourselves in to a third party, which means somebody else who otherwise would have been completely not involved in this dynamic has now been invited into the equation. So, for example, the lender of that money might stipulate, well, yeah, we will lend you this money, However, we want to have some influence regarding what you choose to do with it. So these, I'm going to put in brackets here. I'm going to put next to borrowing, I'm going to put concerns. I'm going to put futuristic. I'm going to put stipulations. What are the terms of any proposed financial agreement prior to legally binding lending, including financial spending. So these are things that Bristol City Council housing options need to take on board. If in the future, let's say within 30 years, this span of time, the person or the organisation that they have a written legally binding agreement with who has loaned them money to build these houses, that these plans and viewpoints and solutions are going to be based around, if something happens to that third party financial provider, what are the consequences to the people who live in those homes that have been built, who are employed to build those homes that are being built, so on and so forth. Okay, that's financial forecasting. And these are really, really, really important things. Let's carry on reading. We can borrow money to build more homes. Or, so it's or, okay, so or means either, it means a choice, it doesn't mean and, it doesn't mean as well as. We can borrow money to build more homes or to refurbish or regenerate existing homes. So now, this presents to me a streamlining of the borrowed money. So we have borrowed money as a hypothetical because it says we can borrow money. So it doesn't say it's already been borrowed. But should they choose to borrow money? Borrowed monies. 1, 2, 3. And similarly to the previous paragraph where I summarised beneath the HRA money pot resources section, I put we've established that there's a crisis, that they're looking for solutions, and that they have resources. So borrowed monies, so instead of putting it underneath the HRA title, which is the Housing Revenue Account, Crisis Solutions Resources, I'm going to put it under borrowed monies, and the three options there are building, refurbishing, and regenerating. Now, similarly, here, building. So we've got borrowed monies, because this is an or, there's lots of ors here. So hypothetical, borrowed monies, building, refurbishing, and regenerating. Now, these two here, refurbishing and regenerating, they have a common denominator, okay? Which means they share something in common, which means the properties that will be affected by this hypothetical borrowed money, which involves financial commitment and obligation with a third party, this refurbishment and regeneration will be affecting pre-existing council house stock, okay? Pre-existing council house stock. Because you can't refurbish or regenerate something that hasn't already been built yet. And then we've got building, which is a new project, which has to get off the ground, so to speak. New project. Okay, pre-existing council homes and new project. Let's turn the page. So, to recap, we can borrow money to build more homes or to refurbish or regenerate existing homes. What do you think should be our priority? So it's saying what, not who. So first of all, I'm establishing what. It doesn't say who, which could mean the people that would be living in these homes or houses. It says what, and I believe it says what because it's referring to not the people being a priority. That's already been established, that there's a crisis, okay? It's asking me, in my opinion, of the information that has been presented thus far, what or which of these points that have been raised should be our main focus or the priority. Now, first off, the word priority can be very restrictive. It can give a feeling of a lot of pressure and a feeling of not having very much time. So the way I would use terminology would be to say, of these multiple priorities, so we can acknowledge that there's more than one. Okay? Which of these multiple priorities should we prioritize? Which means the word or the understanding of very important or main focus is an application. It's a method of application. I'm going to prioritize this rather than saying in a defeatist way, this is my priority. I'm going to prioritize because I have the power, I have the control, I have the influence, I have the ability to make decisions. Yeah, so I am able to prioritize X, Y, or Z. And this is really, really important in any form of business, whether it's social, local, community, or national, or private. If, on the other hand, we chose to look at the what as having to spearhead and condense a lot of pressure. If you think of a high heel, a stiletto shoe, all of the weight of that person is going into a very small surface area, increases the pressure. If we look at a Wellington boot, that pressure is spread out because the sole of the shoe is bigger. So I think it's a much healthier mentality to come from when approaching a crisis, to alleviate and relieve pressure so that any solutions which do arise are coming from a place of clarity and so are there more likely to be successful. Okay? Let's continue reading. I'm going to make some notes. Of these priorities, which are we to prioritize? Less stressful, less rushed, less panicked, but not less important. What do you think should be our priority for spending? Now, you can't have a priority for spending. You can have a reason for spending, but you can't have a priority for spending. That's a non-sentence. Okay, so what or which shall we prioritize as the reason for our spending? Now, I'm going to simplify that yet again. The reason is already there. There's a crisis. So the fact that money needs to be spent is already established. Money needs to be spent. Let's simplify that. Money needs to be spent. So that tells me that a financial budget needs to be drawn up. So step 1, draw up costings. So with a financial budget, as with any project, okay, a financial plan primarily involves, let's say, 2 things. This is the money we've got or we know we can get. And this is how much our priorities cost. Okay? So here we have financial plan. How much do we have in the HRA and how much can we borrow? This way we know what we're working with. Then separately, in a different column, we have here, drawing up our costings. How much will these 3 things or 4 things actually cost to do? Building, new project, refurbishing pre-existing council house stock, and regenerating, okay, from borrowed money. How much would these things that are needing to be done cost? So, in order to establish or to draw up these costings, we need to know building, regeneration, and refurbishment. The same can be done with the HRA. Okay, so you've got 2 sources of income. You've got an established pot, the HRA, the account, okay, which is used exclusively for building and maintaining council housing. Okay, so that figure should already be known, and if it's not already known, it needs to be found out. Okay? Then secondly, we've got the hypothetical borrowed money to build more homes or to refurbish or to regenerate existing homes. Okay? So under the heading of financial plan, because we've established money needs to be spent. So financial plan, we can have the pot, resources, financial resources. We've got the pot, which is the HRA, which is the separate account. And then we've got the hypothetical borrowed money. Okay? Now they've already outlined that there are different usages for the different sources of income. So for the HRA, they've said, well, this is for... Bear with me, my phone's timed out. The HRA, this money is exclusively for building and maintaining council housing. Okay? So we can draw up costings for the HRA and say, well, how much will it cost to build and maintain? Okay, great. And then with the borrowed money, we can draw up costs for how much it would be to build, regenerate, and refurbish. And the way we go about this is by establishing what work actually needs to be done. So, establish pre-existing council housing problems relating to pre-existing stock. So we already have these houses built, they're pre-existing stock, we can refurbish them or we can regenerate them. What needs to be refurbished? What needs to be regenerated? Let's find out. So, we need to establish within this pre-existing council housing what the problems are. Okay? That way we know what needs to be refurbished and what needs to be regenerated. That's going to require information. So we need to know the information in these houses that already exist, so we can have a financial forecast or a financial projection an idea based in real time of what can be done with the borrowed money. Now, we might not know how much that borrowed money is, because that third party, that lender, that bank might say, well, before we lend this money to you, we want to know what financial plans you have in place for the spending of it. We want to know how much you need and your justifications for needing it. In the third sector or charity sector, this would be called a bid, which is a form of plan, because you have to present your cause to the provider. So, first of all, in regards to refurbishment and regeneration, we need to inform ourselves. Do kitchens need to be refurbished? Do gardens and green areas need to be regenerated? How much will the materials cost? How much will the workforce cost? How much will the planning cost? These can all be collated and kept under a private project heading on an Excel spreadsheet. You need to inform suppliers of budget costings. You can contact multiple different housing developers or building material providers, and you can get an average cost for materials, for labour, given the amount of houses which you've established from pre-existing stock, houses that already exist, what needs to be refurbished, how many houses need new kitchens or double glazing or green spaces in a council area, okay? And then from within that, for example, does the cladding in this property meet fire health and safety regulations? Whilst we potentially refurbish this property, is there a cheaper and more ecologically friendly way of refurbishing it? What materials would we usually use for this project? We've been maintaining and building council properties consistently for many, many, many years. What fabrics and what work people are we using now, and how much is that costing us? How can we do things differently? How can we streamline? How can we save money? How can we invest a little bit more money in the areas that need to be invested in, so they don't become recurring problems which in the long term cost more? So we might have to realise it might seem expensive to spend a little bit more on this material or this fabric or this supplier or this chain, but in the long run, as part of a financial projection, it means that this solution is going to be completely successful because the problem is being solved at the root, which means it won't keep recurring and we won't keep having to pour money into the same problem 5, 10, 15 years down the line. Okay, great. So What do you think should be our priority for spending and raising the money that we need? These are two different questions. So they've said we can borrow money, but now they're referring to raising money. So which one is it? Because one requires a fundraising regulation conformity. You have to conform to fundraising regulations if you are looking to raise funds. And that means compliance and governance, which also means you have to educate your council staff and the relevant departments of how to manage the necessary paperwork and evidence that will be required in order for Bristol City to be held account to the raising of said funds. Okay? Is that something you're willing to do? Because that needs to be budgeted in too. Let's do a fresh page. So it says, what do you think should be our priority for spending? But we've established that having a priority isn't for why we spend. We have reasons why we spend. I'm spending this money on this thing because, okay, that's a reason why I'm spending. If I don't spend this money on this thing, the consequences will be this. It's a completely separate concept to prioritization. As is raising funds, a completely different concept. So far we've got a money part, we've got borrowing, and we've got raising. Okay? See how convoluted this is, and this is simply just the information that's being presented on the website. I'm not surprised solutions are being looked for. What do you think we should... I'm just going to summarise that. So we've got the pot of money, which is exclusively for building and maintaining. We've got proposed borrowing. And then we've also got raising of funds. I think consistency in terminology is really important. Even things like having a glossary of terms so that the text that is being shared has a reference point so that everybody who reads that is reading from the same page. If there's a glossary of terms, which there usually is, especially in legal material or published materials from organisations and councils and government and things like that, a glossary of terms is really important. Because an HRA, a loan, and funds that have been raised, which involves the fundraising regulator, okay, which involves regulations, are not interchangeable terminologies. Now that we've got that little bit of information out the way, we can move on. What do you think should be our priority for spending and raising the money that we need? So they're saying here, raising the money that we need. Does that mean that they've already established their needs? Because you've just told me in the previous paragraph that you've got a pot of money and you can borrow money if you need it. So what exactly is this need? Do you know amongst yourselves what this need is? Establish what the need is. Okay. How do we get the right balance between investing? Okay, you've skipped a level there because now you're talking about investing. What is it exactly that you need before you can invest? You need capital. So even before you get to the point of investing, okay, you need to have secured your financial resources. In order to have secured your financial resources, you need to do a financial forecast. You need to know where you're at currently, what your expenditures are, what your debts are, what your overheads are. and also to establish the costings of the work that need doing. Let's continue. How do we get the right balance between investing in the standard of our existing homes? Okay. Investing standard. What else was the terminology? In existing homes. Okay. First of all, what's this standard? Because right now it's abstract, and what is a haven for one family might be an absolute hell for another. So where are you, Bristol City Council Housing Options, where are you deriving your concept of these standards from? How are you establishing what these standards are that you want to invest in? Can you present them to me? Can you tell me what they are as a collective? Have they been mutually agreed? Have they been agreed amongst yourselves, or have they been agreed including and involving the tenants that currently live within these existing homes? That's a point that can be worked on. So who decides what these standards are? Because ultimately, the staff that are employed, that are making these decisions, might not necessarily be living in council houses. They may have private mortgages, and their homes and their houses may be decorated to their own personal liking. Their concept of standards may differ greatly from the people whom their decisions of what standards mean are actually going to have to live with. Not to mention what is outlined within the law as the basic health and safety requirements of properties that are to be tenanted. Okay. How do we get the right balance? Well, first of all, you don't get balance. You don't just pop to the shop and go, oh, I'd like a pint of milk, a loaf of bread and some balance, please. You have to work to achieve balance. And balance isn't always 50-50. It could be 75-25. What's your outcome? How are you measuring this balance? What units of measurement are you using? There's homeostasis. There's equilibrium. I'm not quite sure what you mean by getting the right balance. Can you get a wrong balance? Do you need the word right there? Is it not just a balance? Okay, between. So you want the balance to be between two things. You don't even want the balance to be within the two things. Investing in existing homes, investing to reduce carbon emissions, and investing to build new homes. They're all the same thing. You're making it more difficult for yourself. They're all the same thing. If you include reduction of carbon emissions into the building of new homes and into the improvement of standards, then that's already inclusive, isn't it? Let's put inclusivity here. Let's put inclusivity as opposed to balance. Because when people's needs are constantly fluctuating and we're constantly exposed to change that is unpredictable, balance changes too. And what once may have seemed fair and just may now seem radical or extreme. Inclusivity is a terminology that can be applied, that can move with the changes and the development of our current financial climate, our eco-sustainability plans, The important thing is the inclusive element. It's a collective. Nobody's left out. That's the point. If we make it this or that, it's already restrictive. And it's a horrible mindset to create a project from. It's a horrible environment to work within. It creates division, and it's very costly. It's very expensive. Let's continue. So what other key words? Can I pluck out of this last sentence? So we want to reduce carbon emissions. Fantastic. Well, first of all, what are your carbon emissions now? Does anyone know? Establish what your carbon emissions are. We've talked about standard. You need to clarify what this general standard is and come to a mutual decision and conclusion. And finally, investing to build new homes. Investing to build new homes, well, that's talking about investing. So the action there is to invest, not to build. Otherwise, you would have just put building new homes using investments because the onus would be on the building, not on the investing. So which one is it you want to do? Do you want to do the building? Do you want to build? Is that a point of contention? Do you want to build new homes? Yes or no? Establish that first. If it's yes, great. Let's look at investing up here. Financial money pots, borrowing, lending, raising funds. Okay, we've established we definitely do want to build, and this is the financial plan of what we can invest. Remember I mentioned the word bid earlier with the spreadsheet of how much the costings are. This is our resources. Okay, this is the project. Now we build. Next line of the paragraph. We need your view. Okay, well, this is my view. I'm providing you with my view to help shape the plan. So you need my view to help shape a plan, not make the plan or not in planning. I don't quite understand why there's this floweriness to all of this words, which just dilutes it all. It takes away the meaning. I'm either part of the plan or I'm not. This is either a contribution to the planning process or it's not. We don't shape a plan. We create them, we draw them up, we write them down, we build them, we establish them. Shaping would be with clay. I'm going to shape this original block-shaped piece of clay. I'm going to shape it with my hand movements into curves so that it can be the figure of a woman, because I'm going to build a statue. That's shaping. We're either planning or we're not planning. This is my view. Okay. We need your view to help shape the plan for delivering council homes across our city. So you want me to help you plan the delivery, not the building, not the regeneration, not the refurbishment, not the fundraising, but the delivery of council homes across the city. Wow. Shape the plan for delivering. We need your view to deliver new council houses across the city. Okay. To create homes for people from the ground up. Okay. Because this is work, what I'm doing here with you, of my own volition, of my own free will. I'm not getting paid for it. The time that it's taken, the 51 minutes and 32 seconds, simply to disseminate what it is you're actually saying in these 2 paragraphs, so that I'm then able to respond from a place of clarity, because I've established what it is you actually mean and what it is you want, because you're not able to do that for yourself. Even though you've got paid employees on your payroll who are paid to establish this exact sort of thing. Oh, God. It's fine. I'm sorry. I just need a cup of tea. Okay? Right. Delivery. Delivery of. Delivering for. The plan for. Plan for delivering. Council homes across our city. Okay, so I understand that. As a collective terminology. So if I were to take everything I've just said and understand it differently in my mind and realise that what you mean is it's a very complicated situation, and generally if we zoom out, there needs to be a bit of an outline. We want some perspectives and points of view from the public that will help us generally deliver the needs of the people to the people. Hopefully that's a less stressful interpretation of what's been written here. Okay, the consultation is live to 3 December. And then it has a link underneath it, just here, highlighted in blue. I'm going to click on that link. It doesn't actually tell me what that link is. It doesn't say click on the link below to discover more. It doesn't really say anything, so I'm just going to click on it. Let's see what it brings up. Now I'm on bristol.gov.uk, so I'll apply the same approach as what I did on the Home Choice website. I'm going to write down key points and key information, which is website change. And this is now a government website. Bristol.gov.uk. Bristol's big housing conversation. Now I'm on 55 minutes. I'm going to pause and take refreshment. Thank you.